Good afternoon, everyone. This is Austin broadcasting live with Marlon Mueller. This is week number 5 of Wealth Building Wednesdays. This has been quite a journey. In these 5 weeks, we've covered a lot, although in some sense, we may just be scratching the surface.
Yes.
Right, Marlon? There's a lot of information. But to kick off this 5th week, we want to, Marlon's going to get into some things about legacy and also summarize. But Marlon, if I would love for you just to maybe talk to that person who didn't get to see the last 4 weeks, and maybe they're clicking on this for the first time. And they're like, who's Marlon and why should I be listening to this?
Well, I'm glad to be here, Austin. And yes, we've touched on a lot of different things. I mean, for me, I grew up on a farm and a lot of debt, ran into some economic issues. So I started a journey in just the last 35 years. How do you create wealth? And it wasn't an easy journey, a lot of mistakes, listening to a lot of wrong people. So we kind of talked about that. And one of the things we talked about was our mindset, because, you know, people always go, boy, if I just had more money. Well, that's really not the answer. The answer is having the knowledge, because you can have the money, but if you don't know how to use it or keep it or invest it, you usually lose it. And so the mindset is the most important part of that aspect of learning how to control money. And then we talked about using life insurance as a banking vehicle and how that is kind of your basis for creating your emergency fund and having a wealth creation fund and using that money. And then we talked in the next segment about using it just specifically for real estate. So you can not only make money inside the life insurance policy, but also that same dollars could be making money inside of real estate deals. So you're making money twice. And I actually gave an example of how I could use it 3 times the same dollars. So that's speeding up the process of creating wealth, controlling the money. So many times people just hand their money over to somebody else to control it without knowing what they're really doing. And I used to do that years ago too. And I realized that, hey, maybe I could do a better job. And not only that, but it's my money. I want to protect it better. So, but I had to gain the knowledge. So that's kind of the synopsis of what we talked about, a review.
Yes. And I love, people that are self-taught, you find things that the masses don't do that are right out in the open. And I feel like you've done that because people will say, oh, I've heard of life insurance, but they don't understand the level that you can take it.
Right.
It's not always a sexy conversation, right? Some of the other wealth building things out there that are in the news and people talk about all the time, but it's certainly been around for a long time and it's proven itself. And I also got a little precursor to your talk this weekend, the multiple ways of creating profit and revenue and income. So I'm looking forward to that talk too. So as we close out this final week, I think before we get into legacy, what do you want the listener to walk away with? Like, what would you want them to walk away with just from these 5 weeks? Obviously, it's a continuation. You spent 35 years doing this, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I guess the key is start. I kind of got pushed into it in some ways, due to economic chaos, sometimes making the wrong mistakes. Like, I listened to an insurance agent sell me the wrong products. It took me a while to get out of. So from those experiences, I was like, I got to get smarter. And so I always just say, people go, hey, I got a little bit of money to invest. And I'm like, invest in yourself. There's all kinds of books and seminars and quality information out there. And even getting a coach or a mentor and paying for that, and it'll speed up the process. But that's kind of my whole thing about how to help people is, just start understanding finances.
This is a good question, Marlon. How much do you think you invested in getting around the right people, coaches, mentors?
Over the years, hundreds of thousands, not only just losing that, but also spending that. to gain that knowledge. But was it worth it? Absolutely. I mean, what I've learned and what I've learned to do is invaluable to me.
Yeah. Thanks, Mandy. Mandy's on here joining us. Multiple ways of growth and revenue. Awesome. Can't wait to learn more. Yeah, there's a lot to learn, and it's always challenging to condense it. But these wealth building Wednesdays weren't to give you everything because it's
No.
a journey. But if you look at Marlon's journey of 35 years, you don't have to wait 35 years. You can take some things and speed up that process, and that's what
Oh,
we're.
absolutely. Especially if you get somebody that's been through it. Some people always, look at some people who are very good with their finances and teaching and everything else. And I always say, well, the reason they're good is because they've gone through a lot of mistakes and they've learned from those mistakes. That's what makes them good about teaching it too.
Yeah. Well, I've made a lot of mistakes too, Marlon, and I'm glad to have you in my circle and friendship and just learn from you. And I'm eager for this weekend. But I think the legacy one is a good because even if you are somebody who maybe you didn't even start, and now Marlon's going to talk about legacy today.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the beauty of this is even if you haven't started, this is going to give you a vision, a perspective. And I think it's going to help those who haven't started start, and those who maybe they're in their wealth journey and maybe they haven't thought about the legacy part as much or to the depth that you have, and the fact that it goes beyond money. So I would love for you to dive into that conversation today.
Yeah. So, the thing is so many people put off this part of their planning, and that's called the estate planning, because a lot of people don't like to talk about it, even within the family members, sometimes even between spouses, they don't even talk about it. But that's really a key aspect to your financial picture. Even if you don't have a lot of money, it doesn't take a lot to create a lot of chaos in when you have an estate issue. And kind of give you an example, I mean, I had my great grandfather, they couldn't find his will when he died. And literally
Wow.
34 years later, we really kind of got it settled. I mean, it took that long. It wasn't like there was continuous fighting, but there was that turmoil and ownership issues. So you got to really start planning that kind of thing. And I'm talking about like having a will, having power of attorney for finance and power of attorney for health. And even children that are 18, 19, 20, you're like, well, they don't need that stuff. But yes, they do, because if you go into like our kids were in college or the doctor's office, and I'd say, hey, what's my son's bill? And when they're that age, they're like, well, legally, we can't tell you. Think about them if they got into where they were in a coma for a month or two and you had to make decisions. Could you make those decisions? Not without the court approval. So I'm always telling people, get that stuff in play. And even like with trust, I love trust because a will can easily be contested. Not having a will, that's called intestate. That's like if you don't have that in play, the states do. They actually have rules around it, and they will distribute it based on those rules. It might not be what you want, but it will be distributed. They have rules for that. So if you don't have at least a will, and then with a trust, you can skip what's called probate, and that's where everything that's listed in your will, if you just have a will, it's recorded in the courthouse, in the clerk of court. So I can go in, even like my great grandparents and everything that happened with their estate and stuff, and what they had. I can look all that stuff up. And same with anybody that's had a will. And you can not only see what they had as assets, but who got the assets, who did it get distributed to. And that can be a real problem if you have younger adults and you have a larger estate, because there's predators out there that look for that kind of stuff and go after those young adults, trying to get their properties and stuff. So a trust, you don't have that issue. And not only that, think about this. If you had a will and you got a 20-year-old, and say they end up getting a couple $100,000, what's the difference between a 20-year-old and a 40-year-old in how they'll handle that 200,000? I know for myself, I think a lot differently today than I did at 40, than I did at 30, than I did at 20 about money.
True. But listen, let me jump in for a moment. You talked about probate, right?
Right.
So you want to describe that?
Well, it's just basically there's a process, and you have to, a will gives like an executor. It could be one or two or three people, and so the court has to approve all that stuff, and you got to go through a lawyer, and there's a lot of cost to that. But every decision that's done within that will is recorded, and then it's recorded into the courthouse and becomes public record. And that's the whole probate process.
I
And with
thought
it,
I thought probate was if somebody doesn't have a will, and then the whatever the state or government steps in.
no, it's everyone with a will goes through probate.
Everyone with a will goes through probate. So
Right,
okay,
right. And there's a cost to that too.
right.
So
But
legal fees.
the point is you have to follow that procedure, which could be constricting versus having a trust. Correct?
Right, right. Yeah. So like with, I had my parents setting up their trust, it became a family trust. So when my dad died, we didn't really do anything because everything was in the trust. And when my mother passed away, I literally just went into the bank, signed the signature card, and continued on running everything, the farm and so forth,
Uh,
without a hiccup because there
wow.
was nothing to probate.
So this would, yeah. So this would, exactly. So this is a benefit too. What about this is a good question for somebody who has some type of an estate, and maybe it's financial, maybe it's whatever the assets are, and the parent or whatever dies. They're also relegated to inheritance tax, correct? So
Well,
does a
that
trust
depends.
does a
There's
trust shield you from that, or what would shield somebody from that?
well, the state tax is based on how many dollars is in the state, and currently, I mean, most people never hit that, but well, at least within the family. So, I mean, if it goes outside the family, there's taxes, but that's just kind of another long rabbit hole. I don't think we want to go down.
Right now, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hear you on
But
that.
but the key is having a state plan, at least a will minimum. But I love trust because wills can be contested, and just like we've had so many family issues within our extended families that I've had to deal with that I'm not a fan of just having a will. And the
So,
other thing,
Marlon, what would for somebody who, is this is strange talk to them, should everybody have a trust?
well, trust. A lot of people think, oh, you got to have a lot of money, but you don't really need a lot of money to create a trust. I mean, there are trusts. I've got, you know, sources that you can set up a trust fairly inexpensively, and it does what it needs to do. It's not as complicated as maybe my trusts are, but I've got things that I want to do differently. I mean, my trust doesn't even distribute the assets; it all stays within the trust. So I've got kind of a little of a more complicated one, but just a simple trust can avoid the probate and a lot of the issues that can come up with wills, and it can be very inexpensive. See, the thing, a lot of times lawyers do wills really inexpensively because they make their money on the backside. They'll get a percentage of the total assets. So that's why they do wills really cheaply. But even so, you can get trust done fairly inexpensively if you get, there's certain sources out there. And I say go after those.
Great, great. And then, maybe down the road we can get more in detail about setting up a trust because that's more in
Yeah,
detail, and it's probably depends on the situation as well, like how you would set it up.
sure. Yeah. But see, the thing too, a lot of people always think about legacy only around money, but it's also
Right.
about your values. See, I've told people that like even my mastermind group, there's a lot of wealthy individuals in there with a lot of money. And I said, if you're not teaching your kids and your heirs the values that you have that created that wealth, and you just pass it to them. I've seen that where it just ruins that generation, and a lot of times it'll affect the next generation. So you can actually ruin 2 or 3 generations by just giving all this money without knowing the
That's right.
values, like the values of
Well,
giving and the values of
yeah,
hard work and so forth.
man, that alone, what you just said, that is an area that could be taught to people that make a lot of money, because that has been a legacy problem for generations and generations. If you go back through, I think it's by, yeah, like you said, I think it's the third generation, whatever. They've
Well, you
started,
would say the first generation makes it, the second one maintains it, and the third one loses it.
right.
You
But
know?
here's what's interesting. To your point, an example is Rockefeller, because they're one of the few that they've broken those rules. They've defied the odds. And it's interesting that regardless of your opinion, there was a strong set of values and guiding belief systems that were handed down, not just the financial and
Right.
asset part
Yeah,
of it.
you look at like the Vanderbilts versus the them. Um, the Vanderbilts, I mean, within I think 2 generations, all the money was gone. Where the Rockefellers, I mean, they literally had rules in play. They had there was rules about being within that family fund that you had to follow, and so it created a system in a sense. It's like Ron Blue. He was a financial planner, taught about finances, and I used to study under him a long time ago. But he had this statement. He said, "Money will never turn into wisdom, but wisdom may turn into money."
Oh, that's good.
So one of the things you want to
Maybe
do
type that
is,
in for us. That's really good. Say that again,
you know,
Marlon.
money will never turn into wisdom, but wisdom may turn into money. So that's why you want to, with your legacy, you want to teach that next generation about how to deal with money, the value that money has, for giving, for
Yeah.
helping others, for not just for yourself, but for others. So, and I think that, just that learning about giving, there's a saying that says generosity defeats scarcity, because once you get in that mind of, I got to protect it, I got to keep it, it's all mine, mine, mine,
Oh, that's good.
it goes backwards.
That's a good one. Generosity defeats scarcity. Yeah, that's another really good one. And I think you and I agree on the word stewardship. It's that word stewardship really says a lot, because the one that creates the wealth, the generation that creates the wealth, has stewardship, whether they intentionally developed it or not. And then do they hand that down? That's stewardship,
Mm-hmm.
because that says everything. Developing, these generations, developing the values and the ability to continue to be stewards. And I think generosity is such a powerful part of that, because
Right.
when you can hand down generosity to the next generation, it defeats the scarcity, like you said.
Right.
And I think there's a multiplicity there that you can't really measure, but I do think it translates to um, abundance, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. We always say you can't outgive God.
You can't outgive God, right?
Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. So this has been great, Marlon, in terms of your wisdom, your insight, and we'll look to do something like this again. But you're going to have some things coming up with your launching your webinar, your group Zoom call at some point. So stay tuned for that. Your book is coming out, hopefully in the next few months. Stay tuned for that. And you're going to be speaking this weekend. I'm
Right.
excited for that. I got a preview on your presentation, so really, really great stuff. And I know, not only looking at the slides, but the presentation part. Like I know you're going to really
Yeah.
have some there.
At least touch on ideas of, the mindset and wealth principles. And because really, till you hear what those principles are, you're not even aware of it. It's like they say, you don't know what you don't know. So at least I'll introduce some of the principles so that people can become aware, and then they can start that process of learning those principles.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, any final thoughts as we close out this series, Marlon?
Well, I'm just excited to be able to share some of my thoughts. Are they my thoughts? Technically not. I mean, that you learn from others, so it's really everything that I share, I've learned from somebody else. So, and that's kind of how it goes. I mean, there really is no secret to success. The secret is you just got to understand it. So find those people, read the books, go to seminars, get around coaches, mentors, and network and learn.
Yeah. And here's a great opportunity this weekend to get
Mhm.
around Marlon and to get as much as you can. And maybe there's some people that'll get started this weekend, so.
Right.
No, this has been great. This playback will be up for a short period of time. And Marlon, we could actually pull these down and put them into a little series if you wanted to
Sure.
make it available. Okay. All right, everyone. Well, thank you so much. Get your ticket. I just put the link in there for this weekend. You can hear that. We're going to we have a lot of great things planned for this weekend. We have Marlon's going to be speaking. Obviously, we have Dr. Kevin Jackson's coming up,
Mhm.
Jacksonville, Florida. You want to speak about him a little bit because he's going to be sharing his story?
Oh, I mean, if you have an opportunity to hear his story, it's unbelievable. I mean, it almost brings tears to your eyes, the stuff he's gone through. But he has that resilience of just, I'll never quit. I don't believe that I'm defeated. And I think that is such a powerful attitude that it's contagious.
Yeah.
And just to be around to see where he had to go through, the challenges he had to go through, even just the last few years, and what he's doing today. It's just like you just want to cheer him on to continue growing and going. And yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting because we did a clip called, jail to multimillionaire, but then he had a situation with his leg where they told him he wasn't going to walk again, and here he just did a 5K.
Yeah.
I mean,
With a 73-year-old mother.
yeah, and he's teaching he's mentoring people. But
Mhm.
it's interesting when I think about it. It's like, but the man, the character beneath all that is
Mhm.
bigger than all of that. Like that's what
Right.
comes to me. Like, okay, yeah, he went. He did his time in jail. He came out, got his doctorate degree, became a multimillionaire, and then he almost wasn't going to walk again, just did a 5K. But when you look below the surface, there's that depth that enabled
Mhm.
all that to happen, and he totally embodies that. So yeah,
Right.
him. And then Jose is going to be speaking on the power of the morning and evening ritual.
That'll be great.
That's going to be great. And we
Mhm.
just have lots of surprises. My friend John's going to be coming in. He's 96, World War II veteran. I mean, just a rare, rare situation. You don't get that type of opportunity too often, to talk to somebody like that who has a morning routine himself. I mean,
Right.
this is going to be really powerful. I want to highly encourage everybody, get your ticket, get your virtual, whatever you got to do, get this. We will be streaming a portion of it on Sunday, which is really good news. And we'll talk about that. So Marlon, this has been a pleasure. Well, I look forward to doing something like this again. And we just want to
Definitely.
encourage everybody to see us this weekend.
Looking forward to it.
All right. Have a great day, everyone.
See y'all.